Welcome to the Pitchwerks podcast. I'm Scot McTaggart. Over the last 20 years, I've been a sales rep, a marketer, a manager, an executive, a consultant, and an advisor. This show is designed to give you access to my list of contacts so that you can learn more about how to present your ideas at work and succeed in your career.
Startups and salespeople, marketers and managers from the Epicast Network in Pittsburgh. It's the Pitchwerks podcast.
Well, the interesting dichotomy is that I don't think I'm very good at selling, say, the customer.
Yeah.
So I don't really like that part of the job.
Very few people do.
But at the other end, I mean, in a way, that's sales too.
It is.
I'm convincing legislators, regulators, whatever, that my client's way is the best way and ought to be the way.
There's absolutely no question that it's actually very strong sales.
And I feel like I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot alike, but for some reason,
everyone feels
connect.
like they're not very good at business development and prospecting.
Okay.
Not a joke. Everyone feels that way.
All right.
I feel that way, and I've been doing it for 1,000 years, right? Happy Wednesday, Pitchworkers. It's Scot, and it's the Pitchwerks podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. We're talking about government relations this week, and while that can sound like it's a little bit off color, I promise everything's above board and professional. This week, I've got my friend Peter Madaus in. He's with a company called GIS Associates, and what they do is they tell people what's happening in Harrisburg, what's happening in D.C., so that they can sort of steer things in the right direction, or at least make people aware of what potential threats, let's call them, opportunities maybe, that could take place and impact these businesses that are the clients of GIS. So I think there's a lot here. And I was surprised to find out, Peter says, well, a lot of people don't know what we do. They say they don't know anybody who does lobbying. This is a very rare sort of a conversation for people to have. So I thought this might be a useful show for you. Please let us know. Obviously, I'm going to ask you for ratings and reviews inside of iTunes. Get in there, give us 5 stars and say, thanks so much for bringing Peter and all the other guests in. You have tremendous taste in human beings. Or give me 1 star and say, I'm not really down with what you're doing here, but hey, it's better than listening to all the commercials on the radio. Either way is good. Make sure that we know what you like, what you don't like, and help other people to find the program by giving those reviews. Everything else you'll find at pitchwerks.com, pitchwerks, as per usual. All the social channels use the exact same brand name. Again, it's pitchwerks. So, Peter, I finally got you into the Epicast studios over here in Allentown. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
You like it here?
This place is pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. There's a lot going on here. So tell me why somebody would reach out to GIS Associates. You know everybody who comes in here gives their pitch on their business.
Right.
We can do that up front if you want.
Well, what we do is we help make federal, state, and local government work for our clients.
Okay.
So if an organization or a company wants to change policy, say,
Yeah.
we can offer them lobbying services.
Okay.
If they're looking for funding, we can help them find grants. We can help them with grant writing services. If they want to do business with the government, we can help them do business to government sales consulting. State and federal maybe is a little more, not exciting, but it holds my interest more because at the local level, you're really dealing with sort of nitty-gritty issues like animal control.
Right. Zoning.
Right. I mean, I used to tell people that I would do anything from like Congress to a dog catcher.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was in a municipal meeting and they actually voted on an animal control issue.
That's actually a really good
and
pitch,
I was like, okay, that's not funny anymore. I'm not stopping. I'm not going to use that line anymore.
But as pitches go, right, where you're trying to explain.
I kind of thought it was pretty good.
That's super solid because I think a lot of us aren't sure what's possible. So I think I know people don't necessarily understand all the different issues that they might face. And we talk to entrepreneurs here all the time. So ostensibly we talk about how to present your ideas at work, but a lot of times you're presenting to the bank or you're presenting to that local committee that decides
Right.
the zoning or who's allowed to be in this building or on this neighborhood or whatever. They have a hard enough time just understanding if there's a market, how to build the product, how to market it and whatnot. So now we're actually in motion. The train has left the station and I find out that I've got government concerns or a policy's about to be passed, and that's where you come in.
Right.
And I don't blame them for not knowing what's possible or what's even
Sure.
likely to happen, right? They don't even necessarily need to know what they
don't live
want.
that.
They don't even know what might hurt them until after it's passed.
Right.
So where does that start? Do you have people that just basically pay you to do research or keep an eye out for them?
I don't right now.
Yeah.
But
It seems wise.
you would think.
Especially
keep it up there. I know of contracts like that where it's just like, you keep an eye on Harrisburg, and if anything's going to burn us, let us know.
right.
Or DC or Grant Street, say.
Especially when you think about how fast technology is disrupting so many different
Right.
industries, and people are reacting.
Well, to get back to your point on technology, I think
Yeah.
government's slow to keep up with that kind of thing. Think about Congress. They're dealing with the internet in the framework of a law that was originally written in 1934.
I think they've been given marching orders, right? In a lot of cases, I think they're like, well, you're on our team. Here's the talking points. Go say this.
There is a lot of that, but I think there are some individuals, some legislators that go beyond that.
I'm not saying that everyone does it.
Right.
But I am saying
There is a lot of that, though.
How about this? So if I read something in Time magazine that explains it to my very low level of understanding, and then I repeat it, I tell somebody, oh, yeah, I understand it, right?
Okay.
Of course I don't understand it. I don't come anywhere near understanding it. I understand the Time magazine sort of like color by numbers version that was given to me
Right.
to frame one article, right?
Right.
So the same idea here. I've often wondered, where do they get their research from? Like, how do they learn how these things work?
Who's that?
Well, anyone that's writing or passing legislation, right?
Right.
Where do they learn how these new ideas are going to affect people, the economy? Like, how does the technology even work seems to escape a lot of the people that are making these decisions.
Right. Well, I know Congress has its own research arm. It's called the Congressional Research Service.
Yes.
And it's based in the Library of Congress building. And they have people that do nothing but research. They put out reports for Congress.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how many states have that kind of thing, but at least Congress has that available. I don't know how much they use that.
Yeah,
I know
utility is definitely the question.
I know I used it a lot
Yeah.
when I was there. The other place they get information is from constituents, from lobbyists, from industry, that kind of thing.
Right. You can see, though, there is a less than 100% track record on using the Congressional Research Service when people make comments like, you remember the famous comment, Ted Stevens got lambasted for this. The internet's not like a truck. It's like a bunch of pipes.
Oh, yeah.
And you can hear a staffer in that. You can hear somebody saying, oh, but sir, what you don't understand is that it's more like pipes than a delivery service. Like,
Yeah.
right?
I hadn't thought of that. You're probably right.
You can hear it, that someone was trying their best, their level best, to give a layperson's example of what the internet is to someone who didn't use it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you see that now because I don't know how many legislators have said things like, well, why should I have to pay for a health care plan that includes maternity care?
Right.
I'm never going to get pregnant.
Yeah.
So, and then, somebody has to explain it to them.
I don't have kids, so I don't care if anybody's educated, right? That one's totally local.
Oh, yeah. Well, a lot of education's local in a large part,
That comes right out of my neighborhood.
I'm sure.
One of my older neighbors said, well, I don't have any children. Why should I have to pay the school tax? And you're like, because you don't want to have uneducated monsters, just lounging around the town. It's considered a public good.
Right.
So what are you working on?
Well, I think people are they just don't want to pay taxes.
Well, yeah, big surprise there.
I don't, you don't use the roads, you don't drink the water, it's.
I did this though.
You remember the community. Buck up.
I took that like libertarian turn there for a while. I'm really hardcore because I came to the conclusion that people were making these decisions in non-transparent ways. And the lack of transparency bothered me.
Right.
And I have a feeling you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've been in a lot of the rooms where those non-transparent things took place, right?
You mean the rooms with closed doors?
Yeah, I hear they're smoky.
Not anymore.
They're not smoky anymore.
They passed laws.
It's like the one thing you can get thrown out of Congress for is smoking in the back room.
Actually, I think there are some legislators that still smoke in their office.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Well, plus there's some that sleep in their offices, but that's not a thing altogether.
I'm actually totally okay with that.
No, I am too.
It shows a certain degree of dedication.
Well, what bothers me is the people that use it as sort of like, I am Representative Pure because
I'm a martyr.
Exactly. I sleep in my office so that I don't cost the taxpayers any money.
I've got a Gander Mountain tent out there by the reception desk.
and nobody wants to sit next to you in committee.
It's a purity
Congressman.
test. Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why I always bring politics into this room is the fact that it's this weird intersection of.
If you didn't bring politics in the room, I wouldn't be here.
Well, there's that. But I mean, it's the main reason you're here. It's the fact that on the one hand, it's in everything. Okay?
Sure.
The policy affects everything that we do.
Absolutely.
Literally, I kiss my kids in the morning, put them on a school bus. Well, that school bus was funded by some program. It was purchased by someone at the district. You know, it's reviewed by some other person.
The chair you're sitting in. I'm sure there's standards for that.
Absolutely. And you think about how deeply it permeates everything.
Right.
And then you think, okay, so let's go to the chair because that is sort of reduction to the ridiculous.
Okay.
Right? Okay, so inside that chair, there's some sort of stuffing, which is probably known to the state of California to cause cancer, right? There's probably a tag on it that says that. And someone poured weeks, months, years of their life into fighting this material, and we take it for granted.
Well, California is really sort of running regulations all across the country. I mean, if you look at your lawnmower,
Yeah.
it has to meet California. Because if you sell in California, that's what you're selling everywhere else.
Yeah. Well, it's easier.
Yeah.
Why have one model for California that you can't ship anywhere else or vice versa?
But maybe we don't want California, setting the standard.
How do you fix that problem?
I don't know.
I
mean, it's sort of market driven at this point.
That's my answer. The only reason we all conform to California standards is because the manufacturers think it's cheaper.
Well, and they're so big, they sort of run the regulations.
Yeah. I don't doubt, though, that somebody who has a warehouse in Nevada really wants just to be able to transfer some of that inventory over to California, and they don't want to run out there and see if it's got the California sticker before they send it over. Right? From a simplicity perspective, you only have to set up the assembly line one time. Right. Make one model.
But if the big one hits and California slides into the sea, then what are the manufacturers going to do?
They're going to, well, I don't know if that's ever going to fall into the sea.
No,
if anything, it's going to get drowned by all the, the rising seas and oceans, and we're going to have that problem.
New York City, too.
Yeah, New York's having it pretty badly. And I understand Florida's having some rising water down there.
Well, they're so flat.
Yeah.
I wonder how much of that state is actually under the water level.
I've been told actually down in Miami there are already properties where you just accept the fact that there is no basement, that you'll never get all the water out of it.
Wow.
And again, we're back to policy, right?
Sure.
So here we are, we're fighting about should Garland have been confirmed or gotten a hearing, or should Gorsuch have just been allowed and everybody give him a pass, and meanwhile these other things are happening. The cushion has these cancerous materials in it.
Sure.
There's water in the basement in Miami. There are a lot of fights.
And none of that stuff's on CNN.
So when somebody does come to you, how do they start? Do you find them? Do they find you? Do you have to kind of put the idea in their head?
It varies.
Yeah.
I think most people that come to me or somehow get around to me, they already have it in their head that there's a problem with government that they need to address.
Okay.
And the converse of that is, if you walk into a room, you can't tell who might be having a problem with government and who's not.
Right.
So it's hard to pick out your target.
So you're talking like you walk into like one of these mixers, these business networking things.
Sure.
It's an easy assumption to say that everyone.
It's not like they're walking around with a big red G on their lapel.
I think we should figure that out.
The scarlet letter.
Just make it part of the intake questionnaire.
That'd make my job a lot easier.
By the way, can you please rate your anger with your representation? Right. And we won't even make it a number system. We'll do it the smiley faces like they do for kids that are having pain, or like the really bad smiley face versus the really good smiley face.
Right.
So everybody's a potential client.
So, well, not everybody, but potentially.
Right.
At some point down the road, they may
Yeah.
have a problem with the government. So I think people already know that they have a problem, and they sort of know what they need to do, but they don't know quite how to address it, approach it, solve it.
Yeah.
And so that they look for somebody like me, and I either find them through word of mouth, referral, the usual methods,
Yeah.
website,
It's hard.
LinkedIn. Yeah.
Most people, they spend a lot of time on their consulting side just trying to find people who see their unique value. Because as a consultant,
Right.
you very rarely have broad value,
Right.
right? It's always very narrow, especially, at least if you're doing it right, because you only have so many hours to sell.
Well, I think I have broad, but in a very narrow area.
Okay.
So it's like almost any issue, with the exception of taxes. I mean, if you
Don't touch those.
Yeah.
Please don't.
I'm not going anywhere near that.
Speaking as your friend,
Well,
don't touch taxes.
No, I have no intention of. I mean, accountants went to school for a long time to
That's
deal
what
with
I'm
that
going to
stuff.
say,
Yes.
too.
I don't want to have anything to do with that. But as far as issues go,
Right.
I feel like I have a broad base, but only in the narrow scope of government.
Right.
So it's broad, but it's narrow.
So you walk into a room, it's hard to identify who's having a problem.
And it's not just in the room. It's
Well, I'm using the networking
Right.
example,
Right.
So you walk in and so if I'm you, and you're probably doing this, so forgive me if I'm solving a problem you already solved, but I would almost say something like, I'm hoping that you can refer me to people. Like, I guarantee you've seen somebody try to recruit you this way, where they say, do you know anybody that would be good at this job? Which is a way of asking you if you're interested in the job, right? If I were you, I would love to use that strategy in a networking environment. I would walk in and I would say, if you know anyone who's trying to change policy, who wants to have a heads up when something's going to affect their business, please give them my business card. Same strategy. I'm not talking to you, I'm talking through you, kind of a strategy.
Right.
So have you done this?
Well, people that I network with and I give referrals to for their things,
Oh, yes.
I also say to them, look, if you ever hear anybody, your clients, your coworkers, complaining about government, please let me know. Maybe I should be talking to them.
Yeah, you're doing it.
Yeah.
You're doing it. I don't know if you're making it your first tool out of the toolbox. And that's maybe the only difference between what I said and what you said.
Well,
is that I was saying basically start off from there and then let everybody off the hook. Like, oh God, is he really going to try to sell me on lobbying services? Because I don't know if I belong in that. There is a prestige element to this. There is like I'm not accomplished enough to be your customer element of this. Think about it. Think about it if you were
I hadn't thought of that.
just getting started and
Right.
you worry about how to keep the lights on and whatever,
Oh,
or you
sure.
worry that in some way it says that you think you've made it or makes you a target. Like, some people spend a lot of time trying to stay off the government's radar because
Sure.
they don't want to be targeted for, audits, or they're worried that, if somebody starts paying too close of attention, they might find out that the zoning's not right in the building that they're in, or,
Right.
or whatever.
Well, I think, if they're worried about keeping the lights on, they're probably also worried about being able to afford a lobbyist.
Yeah. Yeah. They obviously have to have the income and the revenue and profit, from that, to be able to afford the lobbyist. But you're not doing this as some sort of like conspicuous consumption thing. Like, you're not,
No.
you're not like, once you hire me, you can tell people you got a lobbyist, right? It's like, and then all the girls will come turning out for you, right? It's not going to be like that. You're saying this has the impact on your business
Right.
that you should be worried about it. This has
Right.
enough impact on what you do that you should be worried about it. But again, I'm not sure that most entrepreneurs and small business people will self-select into, I'm the kind of person that uses a lobbyist.
Well, some companies, you could say to them, you need a little of every column.
Yeah.
You should be lobbying on this issue. You should be doing business with the government. And maybe there's some funding available to you that you don't know about.
Right. My friend Jason and I, though, we always talk about how there's two types of political identity ads.
Okay.
There's Washington fat cats.
Right.
And then there's union bosses, right? These are the two sort of like identity collusion attack ads. And there's variations on a theme.
Sure.
But I think that's spilled into your space where it's like, if you ever use the word lobbying, you're now in that Washington fat cats sort of pejorative.
Right.
And people say, well, I'm not fancy enough for that yet. I don't have a pocket silk in my suit jacket.
Right. Well, I'm not driving a Mercedes. I don't spend thousands of dollars on my suits. I mean, I don't think that works in Pittsburgh.
You're a normal guy.
For one thing. Yeah, I'm a normal guy. Well, the other thing I run into a lot is, oh, you're the first lobbyist I've ever met.
No.
Or I have no idea what you do.
Really?
I get a lot of that.
That last one,
a lot
I
of
didn't
both
see
of them.
coming.
I get a lot of both of them.
I don't have any idea what you do is not what I expected people to say.
Oh yeah,
because people don't typically like to admit when they don't know things like that. How about that? So I like the strategy of going through in that networking room.
Okay.
And letting them off the hook.
Okay.
And then having that be your first tool. You're like, hey, I show up at these events so that people know who to look for. Because all I'm asking you to do is keep your eyes open for somebody who might need my services. And they're like, thank you, Peter, for not asking me, not putting me on the spot.
For not selling me.
For not selling me.
That's an interesting strategy.
I like it. And I also like it because I don't think sales is that's not how you're going to develop the relationship that builds credibility in the eyes of your customer, right? If they see you selling, I think that hurts you, right? Because the whole thing, to borrow from that sort of that stereotype that exists out there in the zeitgeist, is lobbyists just have cash thrown at them, man.
I wish it was like that.
Right? You don't ever have to ask anybody because everyone knows that you have influence. And as soon as you start trying to sell it, I think it takes them out of that stereotype that benefits you from a value perception.
Well, the interesting dichotomy is that I don't think I'm very good at selling, say, the customer.
Yeah.
So I don't really like that part of the job.
Very few people do.
But at the other end, I mean, in a way, that's sales too.
It is.
I'm convincing legislators, regulators, whatever, that my client's way is the best way and ought to be the way.
There's absolutely no question. And it's actually very strong sales.
And I feel like I'm pretty good at that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot alike, but for some reason,
everyone feels
doesn't connect.
like they're not very good at business development and prospecting.
Okay.
Not a joke. Everyone feels that way.
All right.
I feel that way, and I've been doing it for 1,000 years.
Okay.
Right?
You look younger than you are.
Well, the gray's starting to come in on my chin. No, and the reason is because when you're in that BD prospecting, they've got a new title they call SDR, Sales Development Rep, right? These are people who get paid to be rejected.
Okay.
And granted, that's not really what it says in the job description. It says very exciting, upbeat things that enthuse people to come to work for ABC company, right? It's like, are you a real motivated go-getter who knows how to organize your time? And It's like, great. We'd like a bunch of people to slam doors in your face, to hang up the phone on you and to ignore your emails, right? No one necessarily enjoys being rejected. That's why you have to pay people to be rejected. Right?
Right.
Consulting firms, on the other hand, though, they typically do not have an outbound sales operation.
Right. Okay.
So I would like for GIS, all of their sales, BD, networking to be centered around the idea that these people that you're going to meet in the networking environment want to help you because they see that you're a normal person. You're not in a sharkskin suit. You are not sitting there drinking $50 cocktails, right? You're just a guy. And that's
I don't have a big cigar and a pinky ring.
Exactly. You've got to have the Washington Fat Cat
right.
silhouette, right? Like Washington Fat Cat.
Smoke in the background.
Bankrolled Senator Smith's last campaign, right? So when you walk into a networking room, my challenge to you is I want you to deputize everyone in there to be your agents of education. I want you to enlist them because you said it, and I can't believe they said it. I don't know what you do, Peter. Right? So they don't know. You've validated the fact that the market doesn't really get what you do. And when you meet these strangers, they're nervous too. They don't necessarily know what to say to you. So you're basically going to give these people something that they can focus on other than a transactional conversation between you. You're giving them a way to help you in that networking room. And you're selling through them and past them, but not putting them on the spot. Does that make sense?
Sure. One way that I sort of pre-qualify events is I'll go to things that have, say, a panel of government people or, a speaker from government.
I like this.
Or, the breakfast with the mayor.
Yeah.
So that the audience is automatically somebody that at least knows government is related somehow.
Yeah.
So I get less of the,
What
you're,
is a
you're,
lobbyist?
you're the first I've ever met, or I don't know what you do. So it's sort of like, oh, yeah, okay.
I'm really jealous of that education component, though. You are going to hate it. I know you're going to hate it, right? When you have to explain what government relations is, I understand that gets old, right? But I've spent most of my career in technology, where everyone knows everything if you ask them.
Right. Because they read it in time. I wouldn't want to call anybody out on that because I wouldn't want to embarrass them.
That's a bad strategy. But when someone is willing to confide in you that they don't know what you do, you've actually shown that you engender trust, which is tremendous.
Oh, I do it one-on-one. I would, but in a room.
No. I'm saying when someone says to you, Peter, I've never met another lobbyist and I don't know what you do, that's a great compliment. They're willing to be somewhat vulnerable with you and say,
well, sometimes at that point they just walk away.
well, I'm not going to say that they're necessarily going to be a client.
Right.
But they've related to you. They've
Right.
connected with you, and
Right.
they feel confident being less knowledgeable and letting you know that they're less knowledgeable, which is not something that comes naturally for people.
Okay. Never thought of it that way.
So the education component, then, you've actually gotten people out and identified, like, that's a person who could use a newsletter. That's a person who could use a newsletter. You can send that out and
Right.
just say, like, you said you didn't know what we do. A lot of businesses need what we do. I hope you don't mind that we put this together monthly or quarterly or however you want to do it. And you can slowly just absorb what it is that we do. And if you ever find that we might
Right.
be useful to you, you know where to find me. But this is as much of a hard sell as you're ever going to get, is this one pager that says, like, we help this company that does, sustainable energy to get, a project on a grant.
Right.
Who's going to object to that? So when you're trying to convince people, you're actually in Harrisburg or you're in Washington, and you're trying to convince people of a different way of looking at things.
Right.
What strategies work? What doesn't work? How do you convince people to see the side of your client?
Well, one of the best ways is to have the client there, and preferably have somebody from the client, associated with the client, or related to the client, who's a constituent.
Oh, yes. Okay.
So that it's like, this person has a job in your district, and this is what they want, and that really catches attention.
I'm sure. Because now it's
So it's
two,
almost-
it's
it's
two
almost-
meetings in one now. It's a
Right.
constituent meeting and
Right.
it's a policy meeting.
Oh, it's almost never just me and the legislator.
Okay.
I mean, because,
I didn't know that.
oh, yeah,
That's tremendously useful if I'm the legislator, because now I can actually connect it to somebody that I have responsibility for
Right.
when I have to say it to somebody else.
right,
Because I also have to think about downstream conversations if I'm you, right?
right,
I've got to worry about, like, how do I explain this to my colleagues on this committee or in my party or just in the Congress itself?
Right.
How do I tell them why I changed my mind or why I took this position?
One other great thing is if you get the legislator to do a site visit with the client, so then, and it's in their district.
And they can do a photo and everything.
They do all that. They pay attention. They learn stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and they see all these voters working at this. If it's a big place,
Absolutely, and they're very interested in the continued health and success of that
Sure.
that enterprise
Sure.
because that's how they feed their family.
sure,
That's interesting. When you get pushback, right? When they tell you no, sorry, Peter, we understand what you and your client are trying to accomplish. But we've decided to go in the other direction. Is it normally face-to-face, or is it normally more detached and distant?
That happens through staff a lot.
I had a feeling. It's been something I've wondered about. Like how many times they deliver the no in person.
The staff is Dr. No.
Right. It's easier.
He's not interested in that. Okay. And then you're kind of like, all right, what's another way I can do this?
If they're in the room,
right,
then they know you're going to take another stab as soon as you hear the no.
Right. Well, even if they're not in the room, there's.
But if they're present while they deliver the no, it's not like you're just going to go, okay, bye.
More meetings down the road. They say no this time, maybe they won't say no next time.
You accidentally just tripped on one of the great axioms of this fine program, which is that no does not mean no forever. No just means no under the current conditions.
Right.
And
conditions change.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're living it.
Right.
Right. You're watching again as like up is down, left is right. The stuff that you became comfortable with as being just completely irreversible is being reversed. And some things that you thought were never going to come back, hyper-aggressive prosecution of the war on drugs is happening right now.
Right.
We never thought we were going to see that again because of how much money was being spent on those prisons and the overcrowding issues.
Right.
So, yeah, it's a dark turn for the conversation. But I will say, once you see that, you have to come to the conclusion that anything can change. You just have to stay at it. Take that silver lining out of that is the fact that anything can change. You just have to be persistent and stay in the saddle long enough to actually benefit from having planted the seed a year ago, 5 years ago, however long it was.
Nothing's forever.
No, not at all.
So administrations change, the Congress changes.
So if somebody wants to reach out to you and maybe ask more questions about GIS Associates, how would they do that?
Probably the easiest way would be to send me an email.
Okay.
Peter@GISASSOC.com.
Peter@GISASSOC.com. Peter Madaus, thank you so much for coming in to the Pitchwerks podcast and telling us a little bit about what it is that you do.
Thanks for having me.
All right, that's it for this week. Thanks to Peter Madaus for coming in. Really informative episode of the Pitchwerks podcast this week that I think a lot of us needed. So if you're an entrepreneur, if you've got new technology, anything that would be you disrupting a market or maybe other people trying to disrupt you, I think at the bare minimum, you need to know what discussions are taking place, what policies are being considered, what policies could hurt you, help you. Just having a heads up, not even necessarily starting off with trying to influence those decisions, is something that at least everybody should have on their radar. Again, make sure you reach out to us either on the website or social channels and let us know if there's any particular guests you're looking for or anything else you'd like from the show. We'll be working on another one over the next 7 days. We'll catch you then.
The Pitchwerks podcast comes to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a production of the Epicast Network and McTaggart, LLC. Engineering and production by Buzzy Torek and Nick Miller. For more information, show feedback, and ad sales, visit pitchwerks.com. pitchwerks.com. On social media, find and follow the show on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram using that same brand name, pitchwerks.